Hi, my name is Jack Gibbs, and my presentation is on the merchant class. If you don't already know this, a merchant is a member of society that trades in commodities produced by other people. The merchants tended to be very rich. Even though that they made a lot of money than other groups of people, they usually didn't have very much power. This was because the nobility took care of all the political ordeals, while the merchants kept to what they were supposed to do, which is selling goods. This was one of the major problems in the 17th and 18th century. And if you wish to be part of the nobility, you had to be born into a noble family. And if you weren't, you would just have to be stuck as another normal guy. This was one of the big problems that would end up leading towards the French Revolution. During 17th century France, consumerism really started to take a big leap. This was because of the improvements of living and the modernization of a state. Consumers from a broad range of social backgrounds began to purchase goods that were in excess of basic necessities. The middle class, which was known as the bourgeois, stimulated the demand for luxury goods. Luckily, the merchants were there and they supplied all sorts of goods to these people. Since everybody was now buying things, that means that people were making money and were spending it. Since consumers were buying so many things, the state of France made a lot of money off the taxes from these people. By the 18th century, there was a new kind of merchant which was known as a manufacturer merchant. This kind of merchant made goods and sold them to other merchants. A modern-day comparison to manufacturer merchants is a company that makes electronic wires. By itself, these wires can't do anything, but if you sell these wires to another corporation, they can make goods out of your product. With this new type of merchant, modern business practices were just beginning to root. Some of these practices included product differentiation, sales promotions, and loss leader pricing. Throughout this time period, people started stereotyping merchants, and they came up with nicknames such as industrialists, businessmen, entrepreneurs, and oligarchs. Throughout this era, the clothing that was worn by people said a lot about who they were. Some of the clothing included the suit. The suit was made out of 3 parts: the justacorps, a jacket, and breeches. The waistcoat was the most decorative piece, and it was usually lavishly embroidered. In the early 18th century, the breeches usually stopped at the knee, with white stockings worn underneath with heel shoes, which usually had large square buckles. Coats were worn closer to the body and were not as skirt-like as during the Baroque era. They were also worn more open to showcase the elaborate waistcoats. The skirts of the coat remained wide and were stiffened by buckram, horsehair, and other means to fan out over the hips. The front edges of the coat, which previously had been cut straight, began to curve slightly towards the back to reveal more of the waistcoat. Fabrics for men were primarily silks, velvets, and brocades, with woolens used for the middle class and for sporting costumes. In the 17th and 18th centuries, men's shoes continued to have square toes, but the heels were not as high. From 1720 to 1730, the heels became even smaller, and the shoes became more comfortable, and they no longer contained a block toe. The shoes from the first half of the century usually contained an oblong buckle that was usually embedded with stones. Also, in the beginning of the 18th century, wigs still were very popular among most people. During this time, many color variations were worn, but white was becoming the most popular version, and the curls were getting even tighter. The Cadogan style of men's hair developed and became popular during this period, with horizontal rows of hair over the ears. Later on, wigs, or the natural hair, were worn long, brushed back from the forehead, and clubbed or tied back at the nape of the neck with a black ribbon. From about 1720, a bag wig gathered the back hair in a black silk bag. Black ribbons attached to the bag were brought to the front and tied in a bow in a style called a solitaire.